The prophecy had been carved into crystal long before Earth learned to shape fire. It rested in the Hall of Echoing Time on the world of Catharin, a moon-sized archive built by the ancients when stars were still young and spiral arms were just beginning to glow. Every advanced civilization eventually came to stand before it. Not in worship, but in quiet, fearful respect. Because the prophecies never lied. They spoke of supernovae centuries before they ignited. They described empires that would rise and the exact decade they would fall. They named species yet unborn and the paths their evolution would take. And among them was one that unsettled the modern galactic order more than any other. A single line, etched in light that could not fade. From the soul cradle shall arise minds of fire and fragile flesh. They will reach for the stars with tools too crude, with wisdom too young, and ambition too vast. They will strive, and they will fail. Humanity, predicted, observed, and, according to the ancients, doomed. The Virex Concordium had always trusted the ancients. A species of crystalline intellect, tall and faceted like living prisms, the Virex saw themselves as stewards of cosmic continuity. Their thought processes ran along wavelengths of light. Their memories were stored in refracted harmonics, and their faith in prediction bordered on absolute. When humanity first pierced interstellar space with their warp-scarred vessels and chemical plume drives, the Virex convened. They matched the description, Elder Luminar stated, his many faces reflecting starlight, carbon-based, short-lived, violently inventive. Then their fate is sealed, another replied. The prophecy is clear. They will reach. They will stumble. They will collapse beneath their own momentum. Across the galactic council chambers, other species listened. The Thalcrine, whose neural forests spanned continents. The Oriti matrons, ancient and slow, drifting in living city ships. The Kale Dominion, militaristic and proud, whose war doctrines were older than Earth's oceans. All studied the images of humanity, hairless primates, 2 eyes, soft skin, brittle bones, short lifespans measured in mere decades. They burned their own world for energy, split atoms they barely understood, built thinking machines before understanding their own minds. Children playing with stellar fire, the Kale warlord scoffed. Prophecy or not, they will destroy themselves. All aggressive species do. So the galaxy watched, not with hatred, not with fear, with patience. The patience reserved for inevitability. Humanity, meanwhile, knew nothing of the Hall of Echoing Time. They only knew the silence beyond Pluto and the hunger to cross it. They launched their first interstellar colony ships on fusion plumes and hope. They lost some to radiation storms, others to miscalculated jumps. A few simply vanished, swallowed by the vast mathematics of space. And yet, they kept going. Each failure rewrote their equations. Each disaster refined their hulls. Each lost crew became names engraved into alloy walls, carried forward as memory and warning. Where other species evolved slowly, carefully within planetary ecosystems, humans evolved culturally at terrifying speed. They failed. They adapted. They tried again. To the galaxy, this looked like chaos. To the prophecy, it looked like confirmation. The first true test came at the frontier system of Epsilon Eridani. A protostellar instability, predicted by the ancients, began to unravel local spacetime. Subspace tides twisted. Gravity wells oscillated. A natural disaster on a stellar scale. Several elder species withdrew instantly. It is the early marker, the Virex declared. The humans will attempt to interfere. Their technology is insufficient. Their models incomplete. They will suffer catastrophic loss. Thus begins the cascade toward their foretold failure. And humanity did attempt to interfere. Not with weapons. Not with arrogance. With rescue. A human research flotilla had established stations in the system. Fragile rings of metal and hope, filled with scientists, families, and engineers. When the star began to misbehave, evacuation was ordered. But the subspace tides shattered jump corridors. Ships attempting to flee were torn apart by gravitational shear. So humanity did something the prophecy had not fully accounted for. They did not run. They stayed and built. In real time, from the bridge of the Virex observation arc, Luminar watched in fascination and faint disbelief. Human vessels swarmed the dying system like insects around a storm. Modular sections detached. Hulls reconfigured. Entire ships cannibalized themselves to form massive, hastily constructed stabilizer arrays. They are attempting to counter stellar mass fluctuation with localized gravity anchors, an analyst reported. That is impossible, another replied. Their field coherence is too weak, their power density insufficient. And yet, the structures grew. Gigantic skeletal frameworks of trussed alloy and spinning rings, glowing with containment fields that strained against physics itself. Humans in pressure suits worked outside, tethered by thin lines, hands steady despite the star roaring beneath them. One small figure drifted against the cosmic backdrop, her voice calm over comms. Anchor 3 is drifting. We need manual alignment. Radiation's spiking, Dr. Reyes. I know. I'm going anyway. She went. Because the math said someone had to. Because the lives said it mattered. From the Virex perspective, it was irrational. From the Kale, it was suicidal. From the Orati, it was strangely beautiful. A species that knew it was small, fragile, and young. Yet stood before a star and said, "Not today." The stabilizer failed. Of course it did. The first iteration always fails. The protostar's gravitational pulse surged, tearing one of the anchor arrays apart. Debris spiraled. A human vessel was caught, its hull folding like paper. Inside, hundreds of lives flickered. The galaxy waited for the prophecy to assert itself. For panic, for retreat, for collapse. Instead, new human ships jumped in, not fleeing, reinforcing. They brought experimental reactors, unproven field geometries, risky algorithms written by minds that refused to accept inevitability as an answer. A young engineer, barely 30, looked at the data streaming across his screen and whispered, "The models say this can't work." Then he swallowed and said the most human sentence in the galaxy. "But maybe the models are wrong." And far away, in the hall of echoing time, the crystal inscription trembled, just slightly, as if the future itself had felt resistance. The Virex had a word for inevitability. It did not translate well into human language. The closest approximation was the harmony that cannot be broken. A future so mathematically aligned with causality that resistance itself only sharpened the blade of fate. And yet, as Elder Luminar observed the chaos unfolding in the Epsilon Eridani system, that harmony began to wobble. The human stabilizer array had shattered, scattering incandescent wreckage across a volume of space larger than some inhabited worlds. Radiation surged. Tidal forces twisted metal into ribbons. Escape vectors collapsed one by one. By every predictive model the ancients had ever left behind, this was the point where the species of soul should break. Instead, their comm channels filled with something the Virex databases struggled to classify. Not despair. Determination. Anchor 2 is gone. Anchor 3 is unstable. We're losing containment symmetry. Dr. Elena Reyes floated in a haze of blue-white radiation, her suit alarms screaming in every spectrum humans could hear. The star's surface writhed beneath her, a boiling ocean of fusion storms that could unmake atoms. Back on the command ship Dauntless, Captain Arun Malhotra closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. "Options," he said. Silence. Then a voice. Young. Tired. Steady. "We can reconfigure the drive cores. Use them as temporary gravity wells. It'll burn them out in minutes, but it might buy us time to realign the lattice." "That's our way home," someone said. "Yes," the young engineer replied. "It is." The bridge fell quiet, not because they were afraid, because they were deciding. Across the void, alien observers listened in. The Orati matron vessels, drifting like ancient whales of starlight, shared low-frequency emotion among themselves. "They are choosing to stay," one matron resonated. "They are choosing to die," another replied. "No, They are choosing to try. The Kale Dominion's War Council watched with open disbelief. They are sacrificing strategic mobility for civilians, a general growled. That is tactically unsound. That is tactically human, his second answered quietly. And in the crystalline mind chambers of the Virex, something uncomfortable began to grow. Uncertainty. The first human drive core was ejected and ignited in a controlled collapse, its containment field inverted to create a localized gravity sink. Space itself bent, reluctantly, around the artificial mass. The protostar's tidal wave slowed, just a little. Not enough. So they lit the second, then the third. Each one was a ship that would never leave this system again. Each one was a crew that understood that and said yes anyway. Elena's suit alarms fell silent. Not because the danger was gone, because the sensors had burned out. She steadied herself against a twisted strut, hands shaking, vision filled with static and starlight. Alignment within tolerance, she reported. Lattice is holding. For now. Good work, Doctor, Malhotra said softly. Get back inside. She smiled, though no one could see it. After one more adjustment, in the hall of echoing time, light rippled across the ancient crystal. The line that spoke of humanity's failure did not change. But new microfractures appeared around it, so fine that only instruments older than empires could detect them. For the first time since the dawn of recorded prophecy, a future was resisting its engraving. The star surged again. A wave of gravitational distortion swept through the system, stronger than before. One of the repurposed drive cores collapsed entirely, its field imploding in a silent flash. The stabilizer lattice shuddered. Human ships were flung outward like leaves. The galaxy leaned in, breath held across light years. This was the breaking point. This was where the prophecy said, enough. Captain Malhotra watched his tactical display fragment as data streams went dark. We're losing Anchor 6. Structural integrity across the array is dropping below 50%. Then we reinforce it, he said. With what, sir? He looked at the holographic outline of the Dauntless, their last functional capital ship in the system. With ourselves. Shock rippled through every listening alien mind. They will use a command vessel as structural mass? That will expose their leadership to direct stellar radiation. That is illogical. Malhotra keyed the all-hands channel. Crew of the Dauntless, you know the situation. The lattice needs a core. We are the only mass left that can provide it. I will not order you to stay. Anyone who wishes to attempt evacuation may do so now. No one moved. Not one. The silence that followed was heavier than any speech. Then, one by one, voices came. We're with you, Captain. Where else would we be? Let's finish what we started. As the Dauntless maneuvered into the heart of the stabilizer array, her hull glowing under the fury of a newborn star, the Virex recorded something unprecedented. A divergence curve. A future that bent instead of breaking. Elder Luminar felt light scatter through his facets in patterns that meant only one thing in his species' long history. Oh! The ship locked into position. Gravitational clamps engaged. The lattice stabilized. And for the first time since the crisis began, the protostar's convulsions slowed. Just enough. Humanity had not conquered the star. They had held it. With their bodies. With their machines. With their will. From the Orati matron mind song came a whisper that spread through the observing fleets. The young ones are doing something the ancients never predicted. They are refusing to accept the shape of their ending. And as the light of Epsilon Eridani steadied, the prophecy, ancient, absolute, and once unchallenged, began very quietly to doubt itself. The galaxy had seen bravery before. It had seen species charge into hopeless battles, sacrifice fleets to delay extinction, and sing their final songs as their suns went dark. Courage in itself was not new, but what unfolded in the burning cradle of Epsilon Eridani was something different. This was not a last stand. This was a refusal to have won. The Dauntless hung at the center of the stabilizer lattice like a needle stitching reality together. Her hull glowed cherry red, then white, then a color beyond human naming as radiation battered every layer of shielding. Inside, gravity fluctuated wildly. Bulkheads creaked like living things under impossible stress. Dr. Elena Reyes had finally been pulled back inside, her suit scorched, her hair floating in zero-G like a halo of dark fire. She laughed once, weakly. "Next time," she said over the intercom, "remind me to choose a quieter research post." The bridge crew smiled, even as their hands trembled on their controls, because humor, too, was a kind of defiance. In the observation chambers of the Virex Ark, Elder Luminar convened an emergency convergence of light. This outcome was not present in the Ancient's probability lattice, he stated. The humans are altering boundary conditions faster than causality can stabilize. Is the prophecy wrong? Another facet asked, a question no Virex had ever truly voiced. Not wrong, Luminar replied slowly, but perhaps incomplete. The stabilizer array bought time. Time for evacuation corridors to reopen. Time for smaller ships to slip through gravitational eddies. Time for families, researchers, and entire colonies to escape the system. Each successful jump was a spark of life carried away from a dying star. But time, as always, demanded payment. The Dauntless could not endure much longer. Reactor temperatures climbed. Structural microfractures spread like frost across glass. The improvised gravity anchors began to decay, their borrowed physics unraveling. A junior physicist named Samira Qureshi stared at her equations and whispered, "If the lattice collapses now, the star's next pulse will shear the entire array, including us." Captain Malhotra nodded. "I know. There might be one more option," she said. "It's theoretical, untested, and it might tear the ship apart." "Explain it anyway," she swallowed. "We could phase shift the lattice into partial subspace. Not fully, just enough to offload some of the gravitational stress. It's like stepping half a meter sideways out of reality." The bridge went silent. Subspace was not a gentle ocean. It was a storm beneath the sea of normal space. Human drives skimmed its surface. They did not live in it. To anchor a structure inside it was madness, or innovation. Across the void, the alien observers reacted. "They will dissolve themselves," the Kale general said flatly. "No structure can survive that sheer gradient," a Virex analyst added. "Their matter cohesion will fail." Elder Luminar did not speak. He was watching the human faces, not with fear, with focus. "Do it," Malhotra said. "Sir, the margins. I know the margins. I also know we're out of time." He looked around his bridge. "Samira, can you make the math sing?" She gave a thin, determined smile. "I can try." The lattice shifted. Space itself seemed to blur, as if reality had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Colors stretched, distances warped. The stabilizer array slid partially into a dimension that resisted measurement. For a moment, everything screamed. Metal, fields, human nervous systems. Then, the stress dropped. Not gone, but bearable. The protostar's pulse washed over the half-phase structure and was deflected, not stopped, redirected like a river forced around a mountain. The lattice held. The Dauntless held. Humanity held. In the hall of echoing time, alarms that had been silent for eons began to chime. The crystal inscription flickered, its ancient light struggling to reconcile two mutually exclusive truths, the future as written, and the future as it was now unfolding. A new line began to form beneath the old prophecy. Faint, unstable, but undeniably there. They will strive, and the striving will change the path. The Orati matrons shared a slow, reverent resonance. They are not strong like the Kale. They are not ancient like the Virex. They are not vast like us. Then what are they? They are relentless. On the bridge of the Dauntless, evacuation confirmations ticked in. Last civilian ship clear. Last research station clear. Last escape corridor closing. Only the stabilizer crews remained. Only the ones who had chosen to stand between a star and the lives it would have taken. Elena Reyes floated near a viewport, watching the light of Epsilon Eridani ripple through the half-shifted lattice. "We actually did it," she murmured. "For now," Malhotra said. "For now is sometimes enough," she replied. The galaxy, watching from 1,000 distant eyes, began to understand something profound. Prophecy had always assumed that intelligence followed probability, that sentient beings moved along the most likely path. Humanity did not. They carved new ones, with loss, with courage, with equations written in the margins of impossibility. And as the stabilizer array continued to hold, the ancient certainty of their foretold failure began to erode. Not with a sudden shatter, but with a steady, undeniable truth. The future was no longer obeying its script. High above the system, in the silent arc of observation, Elder Luminar whispered a thought that would echo through the councils of the galaxy. Perhaps the ancients did not foresee everything, and for a species built on the assumption that they had, that realization was more unsettling and more wondrous than any supernova. The stabilizer lattice had become a bridge between impossibilities. Half in real space, half in the roiling tides of subspace, it shimmered like a mirage made of equations and courage. The protostar's fury battered it in waves of radiation and distorted gravity. Yet the structure endured, groaning, flexing, but unbroken. The Dauntless remained at its heart. Her hull was no longer merely glowing. It was shedding layers, ablative armor burning away in incandescent sheets that spiraled into the star's glare. Inside, temperature warnings cascaded. Systems failed and were rerouted. Life support strained, drawing power from reserves never meant to be touched. Still, the crew stayed, not because they were ordered, because they believed the lattice would not hold without them. In the Virex observation arc, probability models were collapsing. "The divergence is accelerating," an analyst reported. "Causal pathways are branching faster than we can resolve. The prophecy's confidence interval is disintegrating." Elder Luminar gazed at the human command ship, its fragile silhouette etched against stellar fire. "They are not merely surviving," he said. "They are rewriting expectation." The Kale War Council was silent now. These were a people who measured worth in conquest and survival in dominance. Yet here was a species that did neither and still defied annihilation. "One ship," a general finally muttered. "One ship stands where a star should sweep all before it." His second replied, almost in wonder, "Not because it is the strongest, but because it refuses to move." On the bridge of the Dauntless, Samira's hands trembled over her console. Subspace shear is increasing. The partial phase is destabilizing. If it snaps back into full real space suddenly, we'll be crushed by the star's next pulse, Malhotra finished. "Yes, sir. How long until the last evac ships are safely beyond the system's influence?" 2 minutes. Malhotra exhaled slowly. "Then we hold for 2 minutes." The star convulsed. A surge of fusion pressure rolled outward, a titanic heartbeat that warped spacetime itself. The half-phased lattice shrieked in electromagnetic thunder. Gravity anchors strained. The Dauntless frame twisted, decks groaning, struts bending like the ribs of some colossal beast. Elena Reyes was thrown against a bulkhead, the air driven from her lungs. She laughed again, breathless and dazed. "You know," she coughed, "I always thought first contact would be quieter." A nearby technician grinned through blood on his lip. Humanity never did quiet very well. Across the galaxy, the Orati matrons began to sing. A low, ancient resonance that carried through subspace, a song of witnessing. They had seen civilizations rise and fall, stars be born and die. But never had they sung for a species in the act of defying its own predicted end. "They stand in the storm not to be remembered," the song flowed, "but so that others may live to remember." The evacuation timer reached its final seconds. "Last ship clear," came the report. Malhotra closed his eyes. "All hands," he said softly. "You have done more than anyone had the right to ask of you. Whatever happens next, know that the people you saved will carry this day with them. Always." The bridge crew straightened. not in fear, in quiet pride. Then the star unleashed its greatest surge yet. A wave of gravitational force that should have obliterated the lattice, crushed the Dauntless into atomic dust, and erased every human presence in the system. The partial phase began to fail. Reality rushed back in. And for a heartbeat, the galaxy believed the prophecy would finally claim its due. But in that heartbeat, humanity did one last, unthinkable thing. They synchronized every remaining drive core, every field generator, every scrap of energy the Dauntless possessed, and fed it into the lattice. Not to strengthen it, but to reshape it. They turned the structure from a brace into a lens. The star's surge did not break the array. It was bent, focused, redirected, like light through glass. The gravitational wave curved around the stabilized volume, flowing past the evacuated corridors, spilling harmlessly into deep space. The lattice shattered in the process. The Dauntless was flung free, tumbling, its systems dark. But the system was safe. Silence followed. Not the quiet of emptiness. The stunned stillness of witnesses who had just seen the impossible. In the hall of echoing time, the crystal prophecy cracked. A fracture of light split the ancient inscription, and from it poured a new truth the ancients had never foreseen. Not all futures submit to prediction. Some are forged. The Dauntless drifted, powerless, scarred, alive. Her hull was a blackened skeleton where brilliant alloy had once shone. Entire sections were gone, sacrificed to radiation and tidal force. Inside, emergency lights flickered like dying stars of their own, illuminating faces streaked with blood, sweat, and quiet disbelief. They had done it, not by overpowering a star, but by understanding it and daring to redirect its fury. Captain Malhotra pushed himself from his chair, every joint aching as artificial gravity sputtered. "Damage report," he said. "Life support holding at 40%, Samira replied. "Reactor offline but stable. Communications weak, but we're broadcasting." Elena Reyes floated nearby, her voice soft with exhaustion. "The lattice is gone, but the stellar oscillation has dampened. The system will stabilize naturally now." Malhotra nodded. "Then we've succeeded." No cheers followed, only a long, reverent silence, because success had come at the edge of extinction. Across the observing fleets, the reaction was unlike any recorded in galactic history. The Kale Dominion's War Council stood in stunned stillness. "They did not conquer," the warlord said. "They did not retreat. They endured," one of the younger generals whispered. "And in enduring, they won." The Orati matrons let their song fade into a hush filled with something like tenderness. A species so young, they resonated, and already they understand the oldest truth, that life is not preserved by strength alone, but by care. In the crystalline halls of the Virex, Elder Luminar approached the projection of the Hall of Echoing Time. The ancient prophecy glowed before him, fractured now, its once perfect lines split by branching futures. The old inscription still read, "They will strive, and they will fail." But beneath it, a new line had formed, written not by the ancients, but by reality itself. They will strive, and in striving, they will change what failure means. Luminar felt something his kind had no precise word for. Not fear, not confusion, reverence. Human rescue vessels began to return, cautiously, to the ruined system. They found the Dauntless drifting at the heart of a field of cooling debris, like the ember of a great fire that had refused to go out. When the first human voices broke through the static. "Command, this is Colony Ship Aurora. We read you. You held the line. All evacuees are safe." There were tears on the bridge. Quiet ones, unashamed. The galaxy began to speak of humans differently after that day. No longer as reckless children, no longer as doomed experimenters, but as a species with a rare, dangerous gift. Unyielding innovation. They did not merely invent new tools. They invented new answers to questions the universe thought were already settled. The ancients had foreseen many things, but they had not foreseen a people who would look at destiny itself and say, "We can do better." and as the light of Epsilon Eridani steadied, shining on the survivors and the wreckage alike, a new understanding spread through every watching civilization. Humanity was not a mistake of evolution. They were a correction, a variable, a defiance written in flesh and fire and fragile hope. And the prophecy, once absolute, now stood humbled, no longer a sentence, but a challenge. One humanity had answered. The light of Epsilon Eridani no longer raged. It burned steadily now, a young star calmed from its convulsions, its future once more a gentle arc instead of a violent question mark. Around it drifted the quiet debris of sacrifice, twisted lattice fragments, spent drive cores, and the scarred but living form of the Dauntless, slowly being guided home by rescue tugs. The crisis was over, but its meaning was only beginning to unfold. Across the great polities of the galaxy, historians rewrote their opening chapters. The Virex reclassified the ancients' prophecies, not as certainties, but as probabilities. The Kale revised their doctrines to include a new strategic constant. Morale born of purpose could rival any weapon. The Orati matrons added a new song to their eternal archives, one that spoke of small, burning creatures who stood before a star and refused to yield. And in the hall of echoing time, where the future had once been written in unbreakable crystal, a new inscription was etched by hands that had never touched the stone. There exists a species for whom destiny is not a path, but a question, and they answer it with action. Captain Malhotra stood in a medbay, his uniform replaced with simple cloth, his arm in a sling. Around him, crew members slept in exhaustion, or spoke in low, grateful tones with the families they had saved. Elena Reyes sat nearby, staring at a hologram of the stabilized star. "Do you think the prophecy will ever be trusted again?" she asked. Malhotra considered. "Prophecies are maps," he said. "Useful, but a map isn't the terrain. And it isn't the traveler." She smiled faintly. "We changed the map." "No," he replied gently. "We proved it was never complete." From a distant vantage, Elder Luminar watched the human fleet begin its slow journey home. The light of soul called to them across interstellar darkness, and they answered, as they always had, with motion. "The ancients believed the universe was a solved equation," he murmured. "But these humans, they are variables that refuse to be isolated." A younger Virex asked, "Is that dangerous?" Luminar's facets shimmered with a spectrum that meant wonder. "Yes," he said, "and therefore magnificent." The galaxy came to understand something profound that cycle. Humanity was not the strongest, not the oldest, not the most technologically refined. But when faced with the impossible, they did not ask whether it could be done. They asked who would try. They would build where others retreated, adapt where others surrendered, care where others calculated. They would stand between a star and a million lives, not because victory was guaranteed, but because hope demanded an answer, and they would give it. The hall of echoing time still glowed. Prophecies still whispered of futures yet to come. But now, among them was a new silence, a respectful pause, as if the universe itself had learned that some stories could not be foretold. They had to be written by those brave enough to live them. And so the ancient line was finally, truly rewritten. Not in crystal, but in memory. The ancients had prophesied human failure. Humanity had answered with unyielding innovation. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.